Okay, back to the dinim of kibbud avayim. One of the things we learned that's called fearing the parent or in respect of the parent is that you're not allowed to contradict his words. So now the question is, are you allowed to contradict him in learning, let's say? We find many G'daylim, many Rishonim, in fact, the Rosh used to argue on his father, the Torah used to argue on his father, the Rosh Shalat. The Rambam, it's famous, the one place in Rambam, in Hilchos Shchita, where the Rambam argues on his own father in halacha. So therefore they maintain like this, that if in learning you're allowed to disagree with your father. Outside learning, so some poskim write that if it's not in the presence of the father, you can contradict him. But not in the presence of the father, then you're not allowed to contradict his words, unless if it's in learning, and even then, it has to be done in a respectful manner. Okay, next thing is like this. What happens, what?
Can you do that if there's other people around?
Yeah, as long as it's done in a respectful manner. I mean, you can't say to your father, you don't know what you're talking about, obviously. Right. You say you respectfully disagree, ask why, and so on and so forth. Now, part of the mitzvah kibbud avayim is to feed the father and to dress him and all that. So now what happens, the poskim write like this. The doctor says, your father's not allowed to eat this food because it's unhealthy. Okay, doctor says the father cannot eat the food. The father wants to eat the food, and the father tells the son, I want you to give me the food. And if you don't give it to me, I'm not going to forgive you. So now, by the way, this happens, as anybody knows, when parents get older, this is pretty common. The doctor not allowed to eat salt, and not allowed to eat this, and not allowed to eat that, and they wanted the smoking and all these things. So then, many poskim hold that you're not allowed, you don't have to give it to him. You shouldn't give it to him. The Birkei Yosef, the Chida holds that if it's not sakona, if it's not dangerous for the father to eat it, then you could give it to him. But most poskim say that even then you shouldn't give it to him. You're not obligated to listen to him because it's dangerous, it's not beneficial for him.
Even though Dr. Dower says don't give it to him.
So I'm saying it, so...
he could get up and get it himself, you still don't give it to him.
Yeah, if he can get it himself, he's not going to tell you get it, and if not, I'm not going to forgive you. Speaking in a case, I'll give you a very simple example. The doctor's ordered the guy that he's not allowed to smoke. Okay, he's sick, and the doctor says he can't smoke. And he tells us, go buy me a pack of cigarettes. And if you don't buy it, I won't forgive you. So then the father's not necessarily going to get it on his own, so, that's the din. Okay. Next is like this, another interesting shaila. The Gemara discusses this and the poskim discuss it. Part of the mitzvah kibbud avayim is feeding the father, dressing the father, the mother also, the father and mother. Now, who pays for it? Is it from the father's money or is it from the kid's money? Whose money does it have to come from? And if it's the kid's money, how do you divide it? Do you divide it proportionally based on the amount of kids? If there's 5 kids, let's say, so each kid gives equally, or do you say no? If some kids are wealthier, they should give a larger share than the other. It's a whole discussion in halacha. The halacha, by the way, is that the child is not necessarily mechuyev. The child is not necessarily obligated to pay from his own money. Technically, it comes from the parents' money. But not all cases. I mean, I'm just bringing out points that of interest in halacha, but they're complicated issues and they need to be discussed, every case individually or what it goes. Okay, so you have to, now, when you dress him and you feed him and you take him in, you take him out, it has to be b'sev upon him yofis. You have to be smiling at him. You can't scream at him, oh, look what you're making me do. And he says, even if you give him the most expensive foods, but you don't show him a nice countenance, you don't show him a nice attitude, so you're punished anyway for it, because it doesn't matter what you gave him, it has to be done in a proper way. Next thing is like this. This is the classic, famous example in the Gemara, in the Kedushin of Adam ben Nesina. What happens, a father and mother were sleeping, and the key to the store is under their pillow, and somebody wants to go buy something. So the din is you're not allowed to wake them up, even though they're going to lose a lot of money. And we'll discuss this, a very interesting thing that the poskim ask over here. But that's the basic story in the Gemara. They came to Dama ben Nesina. They wanted to buy the gems for the breastplate of the Kohen Gadol, and his father was sleeping, and he said, "I'm sorry, I can't sell it to you." And Hashem blessed him that next year he had a paraduma born in his herd, so he made back the money. But Apidin is, you're not allowed to wake up your parents.
Whose money is it? Is it the kids' merchandise or is it the...
It was his,
Okay.
the kids' merchandise. Now, what happens though, and here's an interesting halacha. What happens, and this could also be very often, very common. The father is sleeping, and you know the father, Shabbos afternoon, okay? The father is resting. You know he wants to get up for mincha. You know he wants to come to shul for mincha, or for a class. And the father's sleeping. Are you allowed to wake him up? So the din is, if you know that your father would want to be woken up, so then the din is you're allowed to wake him, because that's what he wants. Like this, you can't. You're not allowed to wake him. So the Mepharshim ask a very interesting question. This case of Dama ben Nesina, the key to the gems were under the father's pillow, right? So Dama ben Nesina didn't wake up his father. The question is, the Mepharshim ask and the poskim ask a very simple question. Halachically, he would be allowed to wake him up, because that's what the father would want. The father would want that he should make a lot of money. Whether it's the kid's money or the father's money is irrelevant. The father definitely would want to be woken up for such a transaction. So what's the Gemara saying? That Dama ben Nesina, this guy in Ashkelon, didn't wake up his father. According to halacha, he would be able to wake him up. So they say, in drush, so to speak, they say that what the Gemara is telling us, Takal Bidin, maybe he would be allowed to wake him up, because that's what the father would want. If the father would want, that's what you'd be allowed to do. But what the Gemara's chiddush is, what the Gemara is telling us is that the father implanted in the kid that there's something more important than money. That there's something more important than money, and therefore by the kid, by Dama ben Nesina, money didn't mean as much as waking up his father. Even though Apidina might have been able to do it, because that's what the father would want. Now, by the way, in Kitzur it says an interesting difference. If the father is going to be losing money, then you're allowed to wake him up. If it's the kid's money, but if you know for sure that the father would want the kid to make the money, so then you would be allowed to also. But if it's a mitzvah, like to go to shul or to daven or to go learn, so then you would be allowed to wake him up if you know that's what the father would want. Next din is easy because we're learning it in front of men, even though women watch this thing too, I think. What happens, your mother tells you to do one thing, and your father tells you to do something else. Happens also, believe it or not. Your mother tells you to do one thing, and your father tells you to do something else. Now, it's like this. Alpidin, there's two dinim over here. Number one, Alpidin, you have to listen to the father then. Why? Because the mother also has to listen to the father. What happens if the parents are divorced? So then you can listen to any of them, the one that you want, because then they're equal. Like this, you have to listen to the father because the mother should also be listening to the father. But what happens is like this. This is an interesting halacha. What happens? A kid did something because his mother told him to do it, and the father screams at him, "Who told you to do it? Or why did you do it?" And if he says, "The mother told me to do it," the father is going to get angry at his mother. You're not allowed to tell the father, "Your mother told me that his mother told him to do it." He has to take the blame himself, and that's kibbud av va'em. If by telling the father, "The mother told me to do it," the father is going to get angry at the mother, so then you're not allowed to tell the father, "The mother told you to do it." It shouldn't, even though the father is going to get angry at him, it doesn't matter. Next thing is that, and this we said yesterday, a lot of people are lenient because we assume the parents are meichel. But technically in halacha, a person has to stand up when his father or mother walk into the room. There's a very interesting story. I mentioned this in the past. Somebody once, the Rebbe used to, when the Rebbe's mother was still alive, the Rebbe Tzimchana was alive, the Rebbe used to visit her every day. For a short period of time, he made a effort every day he went to visit his mother. And somebody, a chassid that was close to the family, came once to the house when the Rebbe was there. And he noticed that when the Rebbe was walking out of the house, away from his mother, the Rebbe just didn't walk out. He was like fixing things on the table. He was going out in a very interesting way. And the chassid was wondering, like, what's he doing? After the Rebbe left, the Rebbe's mother said to this chassid, he doesn't think I noticed. She said to this chassid that since the Rebbe was by mitzvah, he never turned his back to me. Since the Rebbe was by mitzvah, he never turned his back to me. So whenever the Rebbe would walk out of the room, he didn't want to just openly walk backwards. He didn't want to. So what he would do is he would make it like he's fixing things on the table, that or whatever it is, that he shouldn't have to turn his back to his mother. That's the Kibbutz Avim. The Gemara says that Rav Yosef, when he heard the voice of his mother coming, he would say, "Let me stand up for the Shechina, for the divine presence." And Bechlal, there's a very interesting Gemara that, unless you really understand the concept, it's difficult to understand it. Rabbi Yochanan, the famous Rabbi Yochanan of the Gemara, said, "Fortunate is the one that doesn't have a father and mother, because if you do, it's impossible to have proper kibbutz avim." And the Gemara Taka says, Rabbi Yochanan's father died before he was born, and his mother died in childbirth. So the famous sage of the Gemara that, Rav Shmuel, Rabbi Yochanan, the Ameir, Rabbi Yochanan, never had parents. From the time he was born, he didn't have any parents. And he said, fortunate is the one that doesn't have parents, because if you have parents, it's impossible to keep the mitzvah of kibbutz avim. The Gemara says, Reb Tarfon, when his mother would walk, he used to have stone floors, didn't have so he would put his hand on the floor that his mother should step on his hand rather than on the floor. And this is the way he went, that his mother should step on his hand. So when he told it over to the Chachamim, that, this is a good thing I did, Chachamim said to him, you didn't even come to half of the respect that you should be showing her. So the mitzvah kibbutz avim is a pretty powerful din. Now you have another interesting shaila. What happens? You have to stand up for a Talmud Chacham, and you have to stand up for your father. What happens if the son is a bigger Talmud Chacham than the father? Who stands up for whom? Does the father stand up for the son because the son is a bigger Talmud Chacham? Or does the son stand up for the father because he's his father? Okay, so in Shulchan Aruch it says they each stand for each other. But the Pasuk bring down the Meram Rutenberg, who is the father-in-law of the Rosh, the one that died in prison, the unpaid ransom story. Anyway, the Meram Rutenberg, when he became the leader of the Jewish people, the Meram Rutenberg, he was in one of the Balei HaTeisus. In fact, the composition of Teisus, the way we have it today in the Gemara, many people say was the Meram Rutenberg. So when the Meram Rutenberg became great, he didn't go see his father anymore. He didn't want his father to stand up for him, and so he said, you know what? Let's leave it. We're not going to go to each other. There should be this whole thing. Who should... When the Rebbe had a teacher in Cheder that taught the Rebbe Chumash and eventually Mishnah and Gemara, his name was Zalman Valenkin, and he came later. He got out of Russia. He went to the Rebbe for the first time. He went to Yechidus with the Rebbe. So he walks into the Rebbe. He was the Rebbe's teacher in Cheder. So the Rebbe stood up. He walked in. The Rebbe stood up full way, and he told him to sit. He said, "I'm not sitting." And they both refused to sit, and they both ended standing up the whole time. Next time they worked it out, but he didn't want. The Rebbe stood up for him, and the Rebbe didn't want to sit until he sat. He didn't want to sit until the Rebbe sat, and they both stayed standing for a while. Okay. Now there's one last thing over here. Then we'll go to my. What happens if the father, God forbid, is blind? Does the son still have to stand up because the father's not going to know the difference? The father's not going to know if he stood up or not. So, and the halacha is the son has to stand up for the father anyway, because it's a din in the son's respect, not the father. It's a din in the child. Okay.